As Arkansas's population grows, so do our energy demands. But with the right mix of resources, reliable, affordable power will always be a reality. These resources are all around us in our rivers, blowing through our trees, even right below our feet. The answer isn't focusing on one resource, it's embracing them all. The electric cooperatives of Arkansas know that a balanced approach to power builds our communities and powers our dreams. Visit themixmatters.com and see why there's power in knowledge.
I'm Roby Brock. Welcome to the program. You have seen my first guest on national television. He appears on Fox News this week with George Stephanopoulos. Bill Kristol is the founder, publisher, and editor of the Weekly Standard. Welcome to Talk Business and Politics. Appreciate you being here in Arkansas.
Thanks, Roby. It's good to be here in Arkansas.
All right, you are here to rally the Republican troops in Arkansas. You're the keynote speaker at the Reagan-Rockefeller dinner that was on Friday night. Tell me what your message to the GOP is in Arkansas.
You know, what I've learned is they don't need much rallying. They're pretty revved up. They'd like to have a Republican Senate, and they'd like to have Tom Cotton as their senator. They'd like to win a bunch of other offices, too. They think the country's not in great shape, and they think Republicans could help. And I think particularly they do think Tom Cotton could help.
You know, Arkansas has been a state that has been slow to swing to Republican, swing to red. We've seen a lot of movement in the last two election cycles. But why do you think Arkansas has taken so long to do what other southern states have done?
Well, one reason is that Bill Clinton was a very different kind of Democrat as a governor and then as a president than Barack Obama. I'm really struck by that, watching the Obama administration. He keeps doing things, and I think, gee, if Bill Clinton were still president, he would have tacked to the center. He would have tried to reach out to Republicans. He did that. He signed welfare reform that worked with Republicans on that. He had a budget deal with Newt Gingrich. In foreign policy, I supported Bill Clinton on a bunch of things he did in the Balkans and elsewhere. Barack Obama is not interested in moderate Democrats or in reaching out across the aisle. And I do think that people in Arkansas have noticed that. Barack Obama is not the kind of Democrat that our traditional Arkansan Democrats are interested in supporting, I think.
And there's not a cultural connection here either. He's from Chicago, urban, kind of core, Arkansas being more of a rural state. Obviously, this race, the U.S. Senate race, Tom Cotton versus Mark Pryor, very high on the priority scale in Washington, D.C. How big is it? We're in the middle of it here. You get to look at it through a different lens. How major is this race nationally?
Oh, it's real big, and for two reasons. Obviously, if Republicans want to win the Senate in November, this one is almost a must-win. But I'd say the second reason, which is sometimes underreported, is people have a very high opinion of Tom Cotton. They would really like to see him in the Senate. There are a lot of good Republican Senate candidates this year, a lot of younger candidates, some vets, some women, some interesting non-traditional candidates. I'd say if you ask most people in Washington, they'd put Tom right about at the top of that list. So it's partly, let's have Republicans win the Senate, and a lot of it is Tom Cotton could be a heck of a U.S. Senator.
Well, you mentioned some other Senate races there. What are some others where you see some candidates that are really kind of cutting through the clutter and standing out to you?
Joni Ernst, who like Tom is an Iraq war vet, who's I think 42 or 43, who I think is likely to win in Iowa.
She spent some time on a hog farm in Iowa, hasn't she?
I gather. You can see her commercial on YouTube, and it's a pretty terrific commercial. But I've talked to her, she's a very impressive woman. Cory Gardner, member of the House, running in Colorado, who's 39. Ben Sass from Nebraska, 41, a Yale PhD in history, who's a conservative. Think of that. He'll be a good senator. So really, I think the Republicans, it's not it's not the old Republican Party. It's and Tom is part of that generational shift, I think.
So this race has been very close. We've seen polls that have shown Tom Cotton a little bit ahead, Mark Pryor a little bit ahead, dead heat. Why do you think that it has remained competitive in Arkansas? Why is Tom Cotton not running away with this race when you look at what's happened the last two cycles in Arkansas?
Well, incumbents are hard to beat, and I gather from friends in Arkansas that a Pryor is hard to beat. And I think those things together, and have made a difference. And then I do think the outside group's attacks on Cotton, I gather, have been pretty effective. I don't think they're accurate, but it's been flooding the airwaves here. Harry Reid's PAC it shows how worried they are about losing the seat. So they've really pummeled Cotton. I think he's beginning to respond, or he has responded now. And I think I gather that the polling shows him gaining and a little bit ahead. I think he'll win, but you know, the Friars have won a lot of races in their day.
That's why they play the game.
It'd be foolish to call it now, that's for sure.
All right, so you mentioned earlier, I mean, this is one of the more high-profile races in the U.S. Do you think that Arkansas has to be won by a Republican for the Republicans to take back the U.S. Senate?
Almost, but you know, as we were talking before the show, it's also Arkansas has always sort of been a state that's of outsized interest and importance nationally. Way back to when I was a kid, and Bill Fulbright, I didn't agree with him, but was a huge figure on the national stage, and then obviously Bill Clinton and then Mike Huckabee. I mean, it's for a small state, it has always produced nationally significant politicians. And I think people in Washington kind of remember that, and they think, well, this is an awfully interesting race.
Nationally significant characters, too. So,
Wilbur Mills.
That's right. That's right. All right. Bill Kristol with the Weekly Standard, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate you being here this morning.
My pleasure.
After this word from our sponsors, a look at this week's top headlines. Plus, it's been 50 years since the signing of the Civil Rights Act. We'll talk to two Arkansans who were on the front lines of integration, Senator Linda Chesterfield and businessman Sherman Tate, when we come back.
A farmer understands the needs of every season, and so do Farm Bureau members. When Arkansas families needed electricity, our members brought it. Reliable roads, our members built them. Agricultural education, our members provided. Today's members may not live on a farm, but their connections are as close as ever. So when that difficult season comes, no member has to face it alone. For every season, Arkansas Farm Bureau. Join today.
And welcome back to our Web Extra. We're with the Weekly Standard's Bill Kristol. Thank you again for being with us this morning. We don't have as much time on the air to talk in greater length, but let's talk about some of the geopolitical turmoil that's going on right now in the world. Particularly, let's start with the Ukraine. We're taping a little bit early, so there could be some developments. But with what you're seeing there in Russia, between the U.S., Ukraine, are we potentially seeing something that could be a real big tipping point in terms of relations?
Well, we are, and I think what we're reminded is you can try to stay out of some of these conflicts, but they have a tendency to expand if we don't step in and try to control them. The U.S. really is the superpower that can keep things under control. When people have the sense that we're not stepping in, that you can get away with invading a neighboring country, you can get away with shooting down Ukrainian airliners, well, then they make a mistake, if it was a mistake, and they shoot down a civilian airliner, and suddenly here we have a crisis. So I think it's a good reminder that people in America sometimes like to tell ourselves, well, we can stay out of that particular situation, but the world can really spin out of control in a dangerous way pretty fast.
When you look at what's happening in the Middle East with the ramp up in violence that's been over there and the conflict that's been there, for my lifetime, I'm almost 50 years old. I mean, is there any hope that there will ever be Middle East peace?
Well, there's hope that there could be more peace rather than less peace. You know, there's never going to be global peace. The truth is, for much of the last several years, Israel has been pretty quiet, and the territories right around Israel has been quiet. The irony is the great slaughters have been in Syria, which Israel hasn't been involved in, and now in Iraq with ISIS and the Iranian-backed forces in the south. I do think the lesson there, too, is let's support our friends, let's not withdraw, let's not send the signal that terrorism works and that jihadism works. I think that's why did Hamas decide to start this whole fight? It's stupid in a way. I mean, they're overwhelmed by Israel militarily, but they're jihadists. They're committed to the destruction of Israel. They see their fellow jihadists fighting in Syria, making advances in Iraq, and I think they think, we got to get in this fight. It really is a reminder that, again, if the bad guys think they can win and think that the good guys are in retreat, which I'm afraid people do think the U.S. is in retreat, it just makes the world more dangerous.
All right, let's shift to 2016. You get asked this question how many times a day as to who do you think is going to be the Republican nominee for president? Who has the best hopes of winning back the White House for the Republicans in 2016, if you had to predict today?
I don't know. I'll give you an honest answer. I really don't know. And here's, I think, the interesting thing. Republicans usually nominate the next in line, as you well know, the second place finisher from 4 or 8 years before. Democrats usually have interesting, wide open races. It looks like this time the Democrats are nominating the next in line, the person who ran second in 2008, Hillary Clinton. Republicans are having what looks more like a classic Democratic primary. Governors, senators, former candidates, a lot of them young, a lot of them untested nationally, running. As a Republican, I like that. I think there's enough already. I mean, I respect McCain, Romney, Dole. I know those guys. I voted for them all in the general election. But I don't think it was a good politically, it wasn't good for Republicans to have them running against a young Bill Clinton or a young Barack Obama. The irony in 2016 is the Republicans will have the younger, fresh face, and the Democrats will be nominating someone who's been around for a while.
In theory, at least.
Maybe. Yeah, well, that's right. Never say never. Who knows, right?
All right. Bill Kristol, thank you so much. Appreciate you spending extra time with us today. That's all for this Web Extra. You can catch the latest business and political news each and every day at talkbusiness.net or katv.com.